to the gym, but this is pretty sharp. I had 4,000 people one time. So this is pretty sharp.
Okay. This is a little bit friendlier crowd here.
Well, no, I'm teaching already.
Whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to the annual meeting of the members of Historic Madison Incorporated. I'm Kevin Yancey, and I will chair today's meeting. It is wonderful to be able to meet in person again, the first time since 2019. I'd like to thank all of you for your support of HMI as a member or donor or volunteer, perhaps all three, and let you know how important you are to this organization. I also like to thank board member Lisa Cutshaw for making this event available via live stream. We are so blessed here at HMI with an outstanding team, which is led by an outstanding person that has a passion for our community and HMI. That person is our president, Mr. John Stacer. John has some special announcements he'd like to share before recapping the 2021 accomplishments at HMI. It's an honor to introduce Mr. Stacer.
Thank you, Kevin, for that wonderful introduction. I'll just kind of skip through a couple slides here for people on the live stream. Tells a little bit about how they can interact and everything like that. And we're on to the agenda. We did the call to order, and now we'll do some special announcements. I'd like to take a moment of silence for a couple HMI members and supporters, both from out of town. Thomas Hollett Sullivan was a Sullivan family descendant from the Jeremiah Sullivan family. He was very helpful in raising funds to help us buy back the original Sullivan portraits of Jeremiah and Charlotte Cutler Sullivan that hang in the parlors over there several years ago. He was also very helpful with other Sullivan family members to raise the funds needed to restore the stone steps and handrail up at the front of the house a couple of years ago. Those of you that volunteered there remember in what bad condition it was before the Sullivan stepped in to help us do that project. Tom also donated family photos, brought other descendants to the house, and greatly enjoyed sharing the Sullivan history with all sorts of other people. And on a personal note, I met Tom, probably 30 years ago at the HMI spring dinners, and we used to sit with Tom and Peggy, Maureen and I did, and visit, and he was just a wonderful, wonderful guy. Another wonderful guy was a cousin of John Windle's, Bill Baugh, who also passed away last year. He wasn't as involved with Historic Madison on a day-to-day basis, but he was very active up in Lafayette, co-founding such events as the Feast of the Hunter's Moon and the Indiana Fiddlers Gathering. Bill remembered very generously HMI in his will. So if we can just take a moment of silence. On a brighter note, I'm pleased to announce that Historic Madison has received an important grant recently from the Jeffress Family Foundation of Janesville, Wisconsin. The grant will enable HMI to conduct an in-depth study of the Jeremiah Sullivan House, its history, and its current condition to help guide the future preservation and restoration of this important house museum. The study is called the Historic Structures Report and will take place sometime later this year. The one kicker is Historic Madison will need to raise additional funds to match the Jeffress family generous grant. We need to raise it dollar for dollar to match that grant. The Sullivan House is recognized nationally for its architectural design and preservation. The Sullivan family and its descendants, some of who you can see on the screen here, have played an important role in local, state, and American history. Very briefly, Jeremiah Sullivan, that's the original portrait that I mentioned before Tom Sullivan helped us get. Jerry Sullivan Jr., that's a Matthew Brady photo of the general when he was promoted in 1862, and Algernon Sidney Sullivan, who was one of the sons as well as Jerry Jr. He went on to found the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, which today is one of the world's largest law firms, headquartered in Manhattan. So it's very exciting for us to have this announcement, and there'll be more about that later on this year as we get into the project. Now I'd like to go to the minutes. The minutes were posted on our website, and an email sent out to all members to review the minutes ahead of time to save time reading through 7 pages of text here at the annual meeting. So the assumption is you've all done your homework and read the minutes, and we'll need a motion and a second to approve. Is there anybody to make a motion? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move on to the 2021 progress reports. 2021 was the 61st anniversary of the founding of Historic Madison. John Windle and a group of community leaders started the organization in this property at a $100 a plate dinner in 1960. Windle's goal was to save the Sullivan House, which we just talked about, at the corner of 2nd and Poplar Streets from demolition. I'd like to think this historic picture of the Windles having a party just across the hall here was that $100 a plate dinner, but they all look too relaxed and didn't look like, they don't all look sad that they laid their $100 down at the plate. So I'm thinking it's some other event, but it just kind of gives you an idea of how the house was used by the Windles in those days. As soon as the money was raised, Historic Madison went and bought the Sullivan House at public auction in December of 1960. And by 1963, HMI had restored the home and opened it as a house museum, focusing on the judge and his family's contribution to state, local, and national history. And since that time, tens of thousands of people have toured through that house. And it's really a testament to the early days of Historic Madison. Shortly thereafter, in 1962, okay, yeah, that's it. Virginia Hyatt McBride and her husband Pierre donated their family home, the former family home, the Hyatt House, to Historic Madison. The Hyatt House is just across the street from us and is lined up with the Sullivan House, which probably gave John Windle the idea of creating a historic park or campus here in the middle of the historic district. This is a sketch we found recently in the Windle files that shows that concept that Windle sketched out for a historic park, which includes the Sullivan House up here, the Hyatt House here, and the Shrewsbury Windle House where we're seated right now. So that was something he was thinking about in the early 1960s. And HMI realized that concept only 50 years later, 60 years later. And we also realized our strategic plan for the organization's historic campus when we moved our offices into the Talbot Hyatt House in 2021, which was one of the signature events for the organization. We had been located at 500 West Street down in the basement of the Windle Auditorium for the 45 years before that. And I never really knew how different feeling you could get when you walk into your office on a day-to-day basis. I've been so used to walking into the basement at Windle Auditorium. I see some laughter, yes. And when you walk into the Talbot Hyatt House, it's like the sun has risen and the angels are singing and all that sort of thing. It's really a wonderful feeling. It's really a true joy to be working across the street. And it's great to have our offices in this historic campus between the Sullivan House, our next major project, and the Shrewsbury House, our most recent project. And I would like to let you know, we will have a ribbon cutting over at the Talbot Hyatt House later on this year. We still have a couple details we need to work out before we have a public event there. But I'll take you on a quick tour of the building. Here you can see some before and after pictures. This is the conference room, which is named in memory of Judge Paul and Mayor Frank Schneider. Here's the executive director's office today and what it looked like just a couple years ago. This is my favorite picture. This is our reception area. And you could see where we were just a couple years ago, down to the dirt. And now we're to kind of a really nice area. And it's fun to have people come in that were kind of tripping over rocks and groundhogs and all that sort of stuff when they came over earlier. It's really quite a change, and it's a great place. You'll enjoy it. So if you haven't had a chance to schedule some time, give us a call. We'll be happy to take you over. And again, we'll have a bigger event later on in the year to open it up to people. Also, we continued following our strategic plan by reducing our property portfolio through the sale of the 1890 Kit Home at 222 West 2nd Street, which is just adjacent, again, to the Talbot Hyatt House and the Sullivan House. So you can see a lot of activity right here in the center of the historic district with our plan. We sold it to a new owner, responsible new owner, with a preservation easement. And this slide I showed because you can see with some of the mid-century, mid-20th century siding coming down, you can see the original design of the house. And it's really going to be quite nice when it's done. I wanted to publicly thank both Jessica Butler and Merritt Alcorn, who were major help in selling this house. So thank you very much for all the work that you two put into getting this property into responsible new hands. Unfortunately, the flash flood of June 19th was another signature event for the year, and one that we're still dealing with all these months later. It appears to have been the worst Crooked Creek flood in over 80 years. It's the first time we've seen the creek top its banks, knock the fence down, and flood the interior of the house. And you can see the extensive damage, the mud footprints on the carpet and in the first floor. It was a real mess, and I had just left for vacation about 12 hours before the flood hit, so we quick turned around and came back and started dealing with it. But even before I got back into town, I had staff and volunteers down there cleaning up the mud immediately, and that really made a difference because it really prevented any extensive damage or permanent damage from taking place. One of the things we had to do was to remove some original 1930s linoleum that we had saved when we did the restoration 20 years before. It was back in the back room of the house where the staff walked in. And it was under the subfloor of this linoleum that we found a newspaper from the Louisville Courier-Journal dated May 7th, 1939. That's this piece of paper right here that was underneath this linoleum. So it showed when the linoleum was installed, and also that the linoleum and the subfloor and the paper were there while we were tearing it up, showed that water had not gotten in and destroyed that part of the house before. So that helped us put all these pieces of the puzzle together. And in talking to neighbors in the area, they also don't remember a flood this bad for a long, long, long time. Here we are doing some of the cleanup, getting in some of the mechanicals to help dry the building out. And then here's an after picture of the parlor once we got the wallpaper and the carpet repaired and restored. Our staff has been busy ever since then doing in-house repairs to plaster, woodwork, and repainting the whole interior of the first floor of the house. We've also been working on new exhibits too, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I have to go to our next building that was hit by the same flood, the former 1850 African Methodist Episcopal Church at 309 East 5th Street. We had 10 inches of water on the first floor and the whole basement was filled. So again, it was another mess. Repairs to the AME Church included FEMA compliant flood mitigation improvements, such as moving the electrical box, the alarm system, and the furnace out of the basement. and raising the AC unit above the high water mark of the 2021 flood. That's how high we had to get it to make sure it was out of the flood zone for the next flood, which you can be sure is going to come at someday. So we've done as much remediation as we can to that building to flood-proof it. Mechanical repairs and flood remediation were funded in part by a generous grant from the Cox family of funds of the Central Indiana Community Foundation and contributions from individual donors. As a result of this major project, we actually have had an offer to rent the building from us. So there's a new church congregation who's currently renting the building. So we've actually returned the AME Church building back to its original use as a house of worship, at least until such time as they outgrow the building, and then they'll leave and find another building. In other property news, non-flood related, at the Hutchings Family Museum, we completed some long-planned accessibility upgrades. And we also updated the Hutchings family exhibits with a gift from the local Tri Kappa sorority. The updates included a children's program area, which includes an interactive computer game and other hands-on exhibits, new exhibit labels, new exhibit copy, and so forth. Back at the Saddle Tree Factory, and this started before the flood hit, we were already updating our exhibits over there. So we already had some done when the flood hit, so we had to go back to scratch and start all over again after the flood. We're in the final exhibits of exhibit construction over there, and hopefully we'll be open in the next couple of weeks. A Schrader Foundation grant helped pay for the exhibit work. All right, for different types of programs, this is digital outreach, and this is partly in response to the COVID pandemic. We did create a great deal of digital content in 2021. IUPUI and its Discover Indiana project, which is right here, contracted with Historic Madison to write text and provide graphics for something we call Madison, the Heart of the American Story, which focuses on 10 properties in our historic district that tell not only local stories of local history, but the connections to American history in the broader sense. The Ohio River was the main artery for the transport in the 19th century and even into the 20th century. American history flowed right past our doorstep and made many inroads here in Madison. The Indiana State archaeologist selected the Schrader Saddle Tree Factory site as its focus for the single Jefferson County archaeological site that they wanted to publish on their website as well. So we wrote text and provided copy for that. And that's kind of down here at the bottom. It's hard to see, but you'll be able to see it on our website in just a moment. And then McKay Burdett, our summer intern, created in-depth online content called A Timeline of the Talbot Hyatt Property, which again is an in-depth look at the history and the archaeological remains uncovered by HMI when we got the property in the early 1960s and to this day. And that's this right here. And all of this information is available through our new QR code. There it is. Jess passed out postcards to you. If you take your smartphone out and open up your camera app and just focus on that QR code, you'll all of a sudden be in the HMI link tree, which will link you to every single bit of content I just mentioned and everything else about Historic Madison. Our website, contribution, membership page, volunteer page, anything you want to know about Historic Madison, you just focus on that QR code and bingo, you're in there. Are people doing it right now? I see people in the front row. Oh, look, Austin got it done. Woohoo! Okay, fantastic. Anyway, so every bit of, that's the single easiest way to get to all this information I was telling you about. It's fantastic. So check it out, take a look at it, do it through the rest of the meeting. If you're sick and tired of listening to me talk, do it later, share it with your friends, what have you. Okay, other highlights in programming. We donated the use of the Dr. Hutchings site to the Tri Kappa sorority for use in one of the longest running historic homes tours events in the state, the Tri Kappa Tour of Homes. Proceeds from the tour don't go to benefit Historic Madison, they go to benefit the scholarship fund of the Tri Kappa sorority. Why do we do this? Ann Windle was a sorority sister who helped start the tour and start the scholarship fund in the early 1950s while she was living here in the Shrewsbury-Wendell house. So it's our way, it's one of the ways we help give back to the community. And I must say, two of my daughters benefited from the scholarship fund, so I'm very grateful to the Tri Kappa group for having that. Candlelight tour. Did anybody go on the candlelight tour this year? Wasn't it a thrill to get out and do that once again with 4,000 of your closest friends? What a major success it was. Again, we sold over 4,000 tickets through the visitor center, and there were lines out the door, and anybody who was volunteering here at the Shrewsbury House remembers opening that door and going, oh my goodness, how are we gonna make it through? We averaged 100 people through the house each hour of the tour. Okay, that's how many people we had through here. And the net income was also at record levels, so it was fabulous. This coming year, we'll have the Saddle Tree Factory on the candlelight tour, and I'm just throwing that out there so you can think about that as you're planning out your fall activities. In our archives and collections, we sent out Brigadier General Jerry Sullivan to get fixed up a little bit. Okay, he's getting a remake. So this is an original Matthew Brady photograph of the Brigadier General when he was promoted in 1862. He was a Union general, and he was on Grant's staff. It was in kind of rough shape. We had it hanging in the office. For years it had been at the Sullivan House without climate controls. And so when we realized what we had, we took it down, we've sent it off to the conservator, and it's being restored and conserved, and hopefully we'll have it back sometime this spring. Once it's completed, we'll rehang it in the office. Once we restore the Sullivan House, the long-term goal is to get Jerry back into the Sullivan House near his mom and dad, because that's where he was. Proud mom and dad would have hung his photo right there in the house in 1862. You know, sometimes funny things happen. One day I walked into work early last year, and there was a packet from somebody in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm like, what in the world is this? What is this packet? And it was a collection of photographs from Nancy Harper Cogan, who was born and raised in Madison, but lived in Brooklyn for many, many years. Her dad was Merritt Harper, Harper's Drugstore, and he took a lot of photographs of Madison in the early to mid 1900s. And so she sent this packet of photos as she was cleaning up her brownstone in Brooklyn. And just fabulous scenes that I've never seen before. So Hill's Boat Works was right down across the street on what we call the Poplar Street lot. This is right after the fire in 1952. And I know the Madison Courier is interested in this because Bob is interested in doing an article on that lot later on. So we have a photo for you, Bob, that shows the fire if you can't find one at the Madison Courier. We also have this interesting photo of a fire in 1907 at the corner of Main and Mulberry. Okay, who knew that took place? And then where the Gunters live. Okay, on their garden, this was the temporary headquarters for the Jefferson Proving Ground in 1941. Okay, in your garden, Carolyn and Frank. Who knew? I had no idea.
I heard.
You heard. And you know what I was thinking? Who knew? I said that to myself. Who would have known about it? Sven Schneider. And he could have told you for about 3 hours about the history of that building if he was here right now. So anyway, so sometimes fun things happen. And then another fun thing happened late in the year. Karen Modisette walked into our office with this German art print, late 19th century, that is said to have been purchased at the Schrader auction in 1972. So she donated it back to Historic Madison, and we've hung it maybe where it used to hang, in the parlor over top of the piano. So it's really exciting that people bring these things back. Just the other day, Pam Zarin walked in the office with a whole bunch of Dr. Hutchings letters and artifacts, some of which we had never seen before. So people are continuously bringing these things to us. It's just one of the things that makes this work so fun and interesting. Other highlights is we've filled 2 vacant positions. We hired Jessica Spees. Many of you know Jessica. She was out handing postcards around. She has a master's degree in public history and experience in county, state, and national parks programs. Interestingly enough, she came to us from the Indiana Department of Transportation. And Linda Wenning, who's our bookkeeper in the back. Hi, Linda. She has years of experience with both nonprofit and for-profit businesses, and both have made an immediate contribution to the organization. So thank you very much. In community projects we've been involved with, HMI has supported a number of important projects which took major leaps in 2021. Some of you may have stayed at the former cotton mill, now a hotel, okay? Major success story, which wouldn't have happened without Ron Bateman moving to town and his development financial team. The ribbon cutting at the Riverside Tower Loss, the former Tower Tack Factory, was a great event to formally christen that. We've supported that. We've also supported the Stellar projects, including the Ohio River, Ohio Theater restoration, and the Crystal Beach bathhouse project. And HMI was also a key participant in the Jefferson County Tourism Alliance meetings. And here's a meeting that we had right next door across the hall late last year. That brings me to the end of my part of the reports, and now I'll ask John Musil, our treasurer, to come up and give the financial reports. And when you're ready to fast forward to the next slide, you just let me know, and I'll click
you. A sign or something like that.
I'll click you through. You give me a sign like
that.
Like that, exactly.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to give you a financial report for the organization for 2021. It was a good financial year for the organization. And in this slide, it shows that the combined assets at year end 21 are $14,214,000. The pie chart breaks down that real estate's about a third. And then the balance is really a mix of endowed funds and cash and money and investments. I went back and looked. A year ago, it was about $1 million less. So we had a really good financial year to increase $1 million. It's primarily related to a really good stock market. So that's the big picture of the organization at year end. So.
Oh, look.
There we go. Now you can't see this. I can't hardly see it. I'm sitting right up here in front of you. This is the endowment trust report, which is really our endowed trust funds. And this report shows that at beginning of the year, there was $5,184,000 in assets. And it shows the various funds, the Roush, Shrewsbury, some of the board designated funds and so on. And the good news is that at year end, December 31st, 2021, it's $5,778,000. So there's an increase of almost $600,000, which on this report shows 11.45% increase in those assets. Actually, the return's better than that because the organization draws 5% to go back into operating funds for various projects and things. So that would, convert them to between a 16 and 17% rate of return on the investments during 2021. So if we could just draw the line right there and say that's the way it's always going to be, that would be great. But obviously this year stock markets and with world events and different things, the markets are pretty rough, inflation, various factors like that. So we'll just have to see, what happens. A lot of things change. I think probably a year ago when I was sitting up here, I was saying, well, we got the same thing. We got to see what's going to happen. Well, we had a really good year, but this one looks a little bit rougher. So be glad to answer any questions you might have. That's just the way I like it.
Is there a motion and a second to accept the financial reports as presented by our treasurer? Is there a motion? All right.
I move that we accept the financial reports as presented.
Okay, there's the motion. And second? Okay, and there's a second in the back. All those in favor? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And now I'll ask Jill Wiest, our secretary, to come forward and present the nominating committee report.
Well, I don't have a show and tell like John does here, so.
Oh, wait a second.
But
You
it's
do.
gorgeous. Oh, I do. Golly, he didn't
There you go.
train me, right?
Oh.
Okay. The nominating committee has submitted the following names of qualified members of the corporation to fill vacancies on the board and or succeed each director whose term is expiring at the annual meeting of the corporation, and that is today. Returning directors for 3-year terms: Jessica Butler, Thomas Eckert, Kelly Lambert, John Musil, and John Stacy. That's it. You want to take over from there?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate that. And by virtue of the bylaws, once that's been read in, the nominations are closed and those board members are back on the board. Very good. Now we'll move on to new business. Okay, there's a couple slides of new business. Number one, our architecture walking tours will begin once again in May. I think it's the 3rd Saturday of the month at 10 o'clock at the Broadway Fountain. So be there or be square. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see if I can go backwards. Oh, I did it. Great. Okay. The Preservation Gala returns once again June 3rd here at the Shrewsbury Windle House, 6 to 9. Information will be going out shortly about that. It is a ticketed event, and it's also a one that's we can present because we have lots of sponsors. So sponsorship opportunities will be going out to various individuals and organizations to help us with that. June 17th and 18th, we're holding our long-awaited wood window restoration workshop. Save that sash, and that'll be over at the Talbot Hyatt Garden. It'll be outside, so we can do work outside underneath the hot sun or underneath hot tents. And that is put together by Historic Madison in collaboration with the City Preservation Department and funded in part by a grant from the Indiana Humanities Council. And in other new business, we will have new virtual property tours and videos coming to our website later this year. And those are also funded by an Indiana Humanities Council. So we'll have videos of this we'll have a Google thing walkthrough of this building. We'll have kind of a virtual tour, click on exhibit through the Saddletree Factory, and videos of the Sullivan House, Dr. Hutchings, and the Costigan House. Those are, again, all being funded through an Indiana Humanities Council grant. They'll be on our website. Our properties reopened for the season May 2nd. See our website for details. Sullivan House, I told you about the historic structure report, which is exciting, but we'll also be putting on a new roof on the rear of the building here in May or June. It will be a true standing seam, custom formed copper standing seam roof that will be last for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. Who knows how long it'll last. And so that's exciting. We will have new signs from the Talbot Hyatt Garden and Talbot Hyatt House. those kind of key into the work that McKay Burdett did for the online content about those properties. And I also wanted to mention and thank Gail Carnes, who's worked the past 3 years as our programs assistant. She did a fabulous job. She kind of pioneered how these signs look and were put together. She did a lot of work on the exhibits at the Saddle Tree Factory and the Dr. Hutchings office. She helped write content, the online content that we talked about before. So a lot of behind the scenes stuff, led lots of tours, and was incredibly helpful, especially when early COVID had hit and I was homesick and we were all just trying to figure out how to get through every day. So I want to thank Gail publicly for all her input into the organization. Before that, she was a longtime volunteer and is responsible for why the Sullivan Yard and Garden looks the way it does and looks as good as it does. She spent a lot of years of backbreaking labor, taking out mimosa trees and everything else that grew over in there. It was a real mess. So thank you very much, Gail. Now that we've wrapped up, I'd like to see if anybody has any questions about anything that was presented here today. Yes.
Did you say how much the grant was that we got for the Sullivan House that we're going to get?
It's a matching grant, and that will be determined once we know how much the study is going to cost. So I don't have a number on that yet. And so we kind of said, yeah, you can do it. And now give us some, go out and get some bids. So we won't know that for probably another month or two. So, but we'll put that out on our social media website and newspapers when we know. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, Merrick.
John, I don't know whether there was mention of remembrance of Spence or not
We did that last year.
last year.
Yes.
One of the things because of COVID, I'm not sure everybody was in attendance.
Correct.
I would like to say something about Spence.
Absolutely. Would you like to take the podium?
I can stand here,
Okay.
but the reason I want to say something is because Spence was so instrumental in the history of Historic Madison, and he was a lifelong friend of Historic Madison. But one of the early instrumental roles that Spence played was as a legislature. In the legislature, he pushed for historic districts, for downtown districts in Indiana cities throughout the state. He then returned to Madison, and as city attorney, working with the Lytle administration, I'm not talking about Mark Lance, but his father, who I believe took office in '59, he drafted and really put and enacted the very first historic district for downtown Madison. And that was the groundbreaking work, visionary work that Spence did for this community. And he obviously did many, many other things, but I don't think a lot of people realize how key and important he was to this organization and all the things that have happened in downtown Madison. Because as a result of that, and 20 years later, we got the historic district ordinance. That was a direct result of the early work Spence had done. So I just want to mention that, and I also add that Spence also was a friend of this organization and did many other things. But that was key.
Thank you, Merrick. Yes, Spence. And it's funny because I made a joke before about Spence kind of talking, and most of you would know that. The funny thing was, he didn't really talk a lot about himself. He never said, oh, I did this and I did that. You really had to pull to get those details out. So it's good that you mentioned that here today, Merritt. And thank you, Spence, wherever you are. Any other questions or comments? Anything for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Jill, did you make a motion? Okay. Don, did you second it? Okay, very good. Okay, the 2022 annual meeting has come to a close. If you'd like to stick around, we have some snacks over in the Windle Dining Room. HMI board members, please don't go running out the door because remember, we do have board meetings afterwards in about 10 or 15 minutes. So stick around, have some snacks, take a look around at the house. and board meetings will convene across the hallway in about 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you again so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for all who were live streaming and participating that way. Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, John.
No.